Welcome back to the Yahowah blog. I am your host, Craig Wynn. In our last program, we made progress through Dode's. It was better known. We shouldn't say better known. He is more widely known as David, the king of Israel, than he is by his accurate name, which is Dode, means beloved in Hebrew. He wrote most of the Psalms, which are technically mizmor, which means lyrics to be sung. And we have begun by reviewing the first of many books that we're going to introduce audibly in these programs, inviting you to read them. They are entirely free, so we're not trying to sell you on anything. We want you to go to yadayah.com, YADAYAH.com. Yada means to know. Yah is the familiar form of Yahweh's name. And you'll see a bookshelf as you enter the site. It's prominent on the page. And all 35 books that we have written thus far are presented on that shelf. They are all free. Click on any one of them. It's presented in its entirety. We ask nothing from you. There isn't even a donate to us button on the site. So these programs are designed to invite you, to encourage you to read the material that we have garnered from our translations of Yahweh's words and the insights that they have revealed to us that we are freely sharing with you. We began this series on the volume called Coming Home. Coming Home is actually the last of the series that I've written on Yahweh. It is important for us because it covers the most important person in Yahweh's story, his son, our Messiah, our returning king, David. And we're beginning with the first volume of what is currently a 3-volume series. And this one is called Kol, which means voice in Hebrew. So this is volume 1. We left off on our last program on about the 16th page of this book if you want to follow along online and read along with us. As we continue, what we find is that Yahweh knows his children, and other than those that are bowing down in judgment, he has no interest in the rest of humanity. He's going to benefit those who capitalize on the covenant relationship. He's going to raise us as his own. We're going to inherit all that he has to give, which is not only eternal life in the 7th dimension, but all of the 6-dimensional universe will be our playground. And the only other people beside his covenant family that he will be paying any attention to are those that he will judge, those who will bow down in judgment for the crimes that they have inflicted upon his people. And in this regard, what that means is that the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are incorrect, that there aren't 2 destinations for human souls, but instead 3. The vast preponderance of human souls do not go to a heavenly reward. They most certainly don't go there as a profession of faith. They don't go there as an act of jihad, but Shamayim, heaven, is afforded to those who accept the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and who accept the invitations that Yahweh has provided through his 7 Moed Mikra each year. And we've talked about these in previous programs, and we'll cover them many times more because they're essential knowledge. Apart from those individuals, there is a number, maybe as many as 1% of humans who, through their religious appeals or their political appeals or their military endeavors, have caused great harm to God's people. And as a result of that, they will be judged, they will be condemned, and there is a place to forever isolate souls who deserve this kind of repudiation because of what they have done that has been so harmful. The founders of religion, guys like Muhammad, Paul, Akiba, Maimonides, folks that bludgeoned Israelis, Vespasian, Hadrian, Titus, Adolf Hitler, Stalin, are other examples. But you can earn a ticket to Shamayim by speaking boisterously and ignorantly, immorally against God and his people as a right-wing conspiratorial wacko or as a left-wing progressive. So it isn't only religion, but politics that can lead to that eternal outcome where a soul is forever incarcerated. But the vast majority of human souls, almost 99%, will neither be rewarded nor punished. There is no consequence for their lives. When their lives are over, their souls will simply cease to exist, which is as it should be. They did not know God. God did not know them. They didn't engage leading people astray or harming his people, so they matter not. And all that is left of them is rotting bones and memories, fading memories in the people that may have known them. So this is the last verse of Dode's first Mizmor. It reads, "Indeed, because Yahowah." Yahweh is the proper pronunciation of the name of our Elohah, God, as directed in his Torah teaching regarding his Hayah, existence, and our Shalom, restoration. Yahweh knows, Yada, recognizes and acknowledges, is aware of and respects, is familiar with, and quite concerned about, indeed understands, and is very friendly with the way of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated. Sadak, righteous, just, in accord with the standard, and thus acquitted and seen as innocent. But those whose path is incorrect, those whose way is opposed to the standard, whose journey leads others astray, they will perish, abad. They will be blotted out or destroyed, exterminated and annihilated, vanishing and ceasing to exist. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1:6. If you want to be Yada, known by God, be Sadak, right, regarding God. There may be nothing more important that I can share with you. We could do 1,000 of these programs. And in the end, all that really matters, if you want to be known by God, if you want to be affirmed and acknowledged and appreciated by God, then you must be Sadak, right, regarding God. One does not come to know God or to enter his company through faith. It does not happen because a mythical creation, a fabrication, allegedly died on a cross. It does not happen as a result of committing heinous acts through jihad. It doesn't happen as a result of following all sorts of rabbinical edicts, such that your lives are controlled by their laws. If you want to be known by God and to be part of his covenant family, then you must be right. And the only way to be right is to know. And it helps to understand. And to be right, Sadak, regarding God, there's only one place to look, and that would be his inspired testimony, the Torah, the prophets, and these Psalms that we are sharing in this program. Further, to do what is right with God, one must disassociate from those who are Rasha, wrong, and Haga, who mediate upon and give serious thought and consideration to information that is contrary to Yahweh's Torah. Today in Israel, in an article that was published in a Haredi newspaper at the time that I scribed these words, the religious were told that if they attended a rally in support of judicial reform, that they would be excluded from the house of God. Now, I can tell you quite frankly that the rabbis have absolutely no say whatsoever as who is included and who is excluded from the Bereth covenant, other than I can tell you that every rabbi will be excluded from the family of God. But they have no ability to do anything else. But the nature of rabbinical Judaism is to control, to make the rest of the Haredim who are not rabbis effective zombies, so they have no free will, no ability to learn the truth. They're uneducated, they're indoctrinated, and they are threatened. But this is what happens throughout all religions. It's not only the Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Judaism, where this is prevalent, but it also was prevalent throughout the long history of the Roman Catholic Church, where you were excommunicated if you challenged any one of their edicts. And in Islam, throughout its history, if you speak out against Muhammad or Allah in an Islamic country, they will kill you. Well, in this case, it wasn't because the rabbis opposed judicial reform. As a matter of fact, they were in favor of it, all for the wrong reasons. They want exemption, so they're treated differently than everybody else. And so they're not only not drafted and don't have to serve defending Israel, but also so that they can get stipends for being parasites. And so they want judicial reform because the courts in Israel are very liberal and are not fond of the religious edicts and what they are demanding. But it's because these rabbis want everyone else to disengage from politics, because they want to control them. They want to tell them who to vote for, how to vote, what to do and what not to do. And the rabbis claim that their knowledge is superior, and so that only they can express their free will, but all other free will is not to be tolerated in Judaism amongst ultra-Orthodox Jews, which means that the rabbis are saying that if you're a Haredim, you're too stupid to think for yourself. Now, you are uneducated, you are indoctrinated, but it doesn't need to be that way. You can tell them to go to hell. They're going there anyway. You just give them some directions and fair warning. The depravity of religious control boggles the mind. Rabbis will be fortunate if their souls are allowed to perish. If so authorized, I'll send them all to Sheol. Speaking of abad, perishing, there is a little known and profoundly important aspect of divine judgment that few appreciate. And that is what I shared with you moments ago. Most souls abad cease to exist upon a person's mortality. There is no reward, no punishment. The nephesh soul simply fades to oblivion. It is only by deliberately misleading others regarding Yahowah that a soul earns a one-way ticket to Sheol, which is a lightless place of eternal carceration. It's very much like a black hole, where that which goes in never comes out, where it is constrained to a single dimension. All the physical dimensions that we know of are contracted to a point, so only time exists eternally. It's also called hell. And there, my friends, is a summation of the first Mizmor. I want to repeat it to you because I want just one last look at the introductory comments that our Messiah and Savior, our King, God's chosen, his Son, penned on our behalf. He began joyful with me and blessed by me, fortunate in the relationship and stepping along the straightforward path which I have provided to give meaning to life, is the individual who has, as a result of the relationship, chosen not to walk in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect, does not stand in the way of those who are misleading with their errant platitudes, neither sits nor dwells in the company of those who babble, confounding by scoffing and ridiculing. Indeed, and by contrast, within the Torah, the teaching and guidance, the instruction and direction of Yahowah is what is valuable and what matters to him. And in his Torah, in his directions and instructions, his guidance and teaching, he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information so as to speak decisively day and night. Mizmor 1:1 and 1:2. And he is like a tree that is planted near an idyllic stream of flowing water, such that as a result of his beneficial relationship, he produces and bestows his fruit in its appointed time. His uplifting branch will never wither, and he will never lack for understanding in everything that he engages in to show the way to the benefits of the relationship. He will succeed and prosper. Mizmor 1:3. This is not true, however, even remotely similar, with those who are incorrect, with those who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, who instead will be like the chaff which is driven away and refuted by the Spirit. Therefore, based upon this reasoning, those who are incorrect, misled, and misleading will not stand upright during the judgment, nor those who are wrong in the enduring community of witnesses of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated. Mizmor Psalm 1:5. Indeed, because Yahweh knows the way of those who are upright, he is familiar with the paths of those who are correct and vindicated, Sadak. But those whose path is invalid, they're going to perish. Those who are observant and accept Yahweh's Torah teaching and guidance are right, blessed with knowledge and understanding, joyful and productive, as well as vindicated, always correct on the issues which matter most, especially those regarding life and death, being right and wrong. Those who believe man's mantras, whether they be political or religious, conspiratorial or militaristic, will remain confounded and confused. They will be judged and found to be wrong, exterminated and expelled. Yisrael, there is every reason to conclude that as Yehudim, you are smart. With 0.2% of the world's population earning 30% of the Nobel Prizes in the sciences. So how is it that you have been collectively on the wrong side of this simple equation for the past 3,000 years? Why is it when Yahweh wanted someone to take his testimony seriously and then share it accurately and insightfully with you, he couldn't find a single Yehud willing to step up and had to stoop with working with a goy? Sometimes I'm guided to things that, while always available and true, are perfect at the moment. The first word in the first psalm was a noteworthy example, but so is this next sentence, the first of the second Mizmor. And before I share it with you, I want to underscore something that is not well known, but exceedingly important as an insight in your walk from man's world, the world of religion and politics and militarism, the control of others, to the liberation, emancipation, empowerment, and enrichment that there is in Yahweh's company. And that is throughout the Torah, throughout the prophets, and now throughout the Psalms, we find a consistent pattern. And that is that Yahweh not only explains the right path for us to walk, for us to engage in the covenant relationship, for us to be adopted into his family, to be his children forevermore, to inherit all that he has to give, to become immortal, to be perfected by him. He also is vociferous about sharing what it is that precludes this understanding, what it is that gets in the way of people coming to know what God is offering, coming to appreciate what he is expecting in return. Knowing his name, for example, knowing that he has a beloved son, a firstborn, that there is a Messiah who is returning, and that the returning king is Daud, God's chosen one. What is it that precludes people from knowing these things? Religion. Look at Christianity. Jesus Christ is nothing but a counterfeit. He's a counterfeit of dode. He's a fictitious individual that was contrived based upon replacement foolology to rob everything that was important about dode and to give it to this myth, to create this new religion. All robbing dode so that no one would know what dode has accomplished. No one would know that he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, that he was the Passover lamb, that he is the one that perfected us and therefore saved us, and that we're born into the family of God based upon what he has achieved, that he is the Messiah. Yes, and the very Son of God. All of that was hidden because of the counterfeit perpetrated by Peter and Paul. It also exists in Judaism to counter the growing influence of this counterfeit in the culture. Rabbi Akiva countered one false Messiah with another, as if two lies make a truth. And he foisted Bar Kokhba, son of a star. You want to know, Israel, why you have a star on your flag? Well, it's not the star of David. David didn't have a star. But Bar Kokhba, the false Messiah, Rabbi Akiva, the founder of Rabbinic Judaism, most certainly was a star. And upon this false Messiah, Judaism was not only born, but it invited the Romans back in for the third time. And this time they destroyed Judea. They renamed it, which is the plague of Hadrian, which is why you're dealing with the myth of Palestinians and a Palestinian state, is because Hadrian renamed the province of Judah, of Yahudah, of Jews, Philistina, after the long extinct Philistines, just to aggravate, rub salt into the wound of what he had done. Rabbi Akiva's mistake that invited the Romans back in led to the diaspora. Without Rabbi Akiva's foolishness and foisting a false Messiah on the world, there is no diaspora. There is no renaming of the land. There is no exile of the people. There is no destruction of Jerusalem. There's no Holocaust. As a matter of fact, had he simply acknowledged that Dode is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God, that he, according to the prophets, fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, there is no counterfeit Jesus Christ. There's no religion that would subject Jews to the persecution that they endured over these past 1900 years as a result of the Roman Church. This is the consequence of piling lies on top of the truth. Yahweh calls it Babel, intermixing lies with truth to confound and confuse. And without Rabbi Akiva's Judaism, there is no Babylonian Torah or Talmud. It's definitely not a Torah, it's a Talmud. And it was right after compiling that Babylonian Talmud that rabbis sold recitals from it to Muhammad to create the Quran. There is no Quran without rabbis selling Muhammad their stories out of the Talmud, which were twisted and then represented as if they were inspiration from Allah when they were paid recitals from the rabbis. You see, rabbis, by not acknowledging what Dode had accomplished, allowed Christianity to emerge as a counterfeit. And they are responsible for making the Quran credible. To the degree that it is, it's the worst book ever written. But nonetheless, it's the rabbis who sold Muhammad the stories that he incorporated. This is a fact that cannot be denied. It is ubiquitous. And in my 5-volume set, Goddamn Religion, which is the most comprehensive and chronological, contextual, and complete presentation ever of the 5 oldest scriptural sources of Islam, I prove it emphatically. So this is what happens when lies pile on top of lies. And therefore, when I tell you that Dowd is your Messiah, that Dowd is the Son of God, not that counterfeit, that there is no basis for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam without these lies, without foolishly replacing the truth to confound and confuse. That it may sound shrill, it may sound, how can that be true when billions of people believe otherwise? Well, it's because lies are very seductive. And because once you impose a lie and then you establish an authority to control people through it, religions are very, very good at being bad. And they have a profound effect on culture and people's lives. And so by sharing the Mizmor, I'm trying to right the wrong. I'm trying to do what Dowd did. You see that Dowd was equal in his condemnation of religion and politics and his presentation of the truth and what's right about God. And everything I have written, everything I have studied, everything I have shared since that time is the same. I'm devoted to telling you what's wrong about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, right-wing conspiracy, and left-wing progressives, because you need to know these things. You must discard their influence. You must step away from them. It's a prerequisite of the covenant, and it is a prerequisite of knowing God. And so Dowd did what Yahweh did throughout his Torah, prophets, and Psalms. What I have done through not only this book, but all 35 that I am offering to you. And so we must do both. And shortly, I'm going to turn to Goddamn Religion, and I'm going to begin readings from it to introduce you to it. And I'm going to do the same thing for Twistianity, and I will do it again for the books in the Babel series, so that you know who God is not, that the God of religion is exceedingly easy to reject, doesn't exist. The real God is the antithesis of the religious God. As we begin the second Mizmor, inexplicably and frustratingly, there is a greater propensity for people to believe in conspiracies today than there is even to be overtly religious or political. It's the fastest growing belief system in the world. And there is a conspiracy for everyone. They're all numbskull, they're all false, and yet they're captivating because people take just this nuance of evidence and then they twist it and pervert it, build it out of scale, and disregard all evidence that proves it to be incorrect. Discard reason, logic. It's this giant sinkhole into which credibility plummets. Well, the numbers are staggering, with the majority of people worldwide snookered by one hoax or another. For most, the lure of conspiracy is simple. People are looking for someone else to blame for their unfulfilling lives. And they advance conspiracies for this purpose. The conspiratorial menace has grown so large and so vocal that numerous scientific studies have been conducted to determine what prompts so many people to believe and then promote absurdly ridiculous notions. And what they have found is that there is but one single common denominator among conspiratorialists. And it isn't age, it isn't politics, it isn't ethnicity or nationality or religion, but instead, they're all losers, unwilling to accept responsibility for their unsatisfactory lives and empty existence. They fault those deemed successful for controlling and inhibiting them. Now, today, the most conspiratorial are actually progressives. They have aligned themselves with Islamic interests to condemn Israel and Jews. They would have you believe the conspiracy that the Israeli response to save their country, to prohibit what occurred on October 7th of 23 from ever happening again, they would have you believe that that's genocidal. When in fact, the opposite is true. Of non-combatants, it's less than 1% of the Gazans that have actually died. Now, I know the media touts these numbers that are presented by Hamas as if Hamas was even the least bit credible. They don't recognize they're being played for fools, that the lives of jihadists are counted in the totals when those are the intended victims because they perpetrated the heinous rapes and tortures and terrorism and mass murders and abductions. And that the number of women and children that have actually died is exceedingly small. And it's those women that celebrated the acts of savagery that were perpetrated against the Jews. It's those women who gave birth to the jihadists. And the young children are nothing but vipers in the making. I mean, that's the truth. And the fact of the matter is that there has never been a defense of one's nation that has been carried out more humanely than what Jews are doing in Gaza. They could have eliminated Gaza from the air and never lost another soldier, but they've lost over 1,000 of their own trying to protect so-called civilians in that swamp. And yet, for doing so and defending themselves, the shrill progressive voices, the United Nations, and newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post and the British publications would all have you believe that it's the Jews perpetrating genocide, when it was the Muslims that were attempting genocide against the Jews and have perpetrated genocidal attacks against Jews for all 1,400 years that Islam has existed, beginning with Muhammad. And the realization that the opposite is true, that in those Islamic countries, some 50 of them surrounding Israel, that the Jewish population in those countries, since Israel was afforded her homeland again in 1948, the Jewish populations of those countries has endured genocide, with the Jewish population being reduced by 99.9%. That is extreme genocide. While the Muslim populations and those territories controlled by Israel has increased by 400%. The opposite of what progressives are projecting is true. That's the nature of a conspiracy. But because religion, overt religion, and overt politics are indistinguishable, people parrot lies based on faith. And they don't want to be ostracized from their echo chamber. So they all say the same thing. And so it is very difficult today to share the truth. As a matter of fact, there are thought police that search sites like Facebook, even X, Rumble, and YouTube for anyone who would dare tell you the truth, who would expose and condemn Islam and Christianity and progressives for the lies that they are perpetrating. But that is essential. And if you don't have an appreciation for how progressives in academia and in the media and in politics and right-wing conspiratorial wackos, as well as Muslims and Christians, are leading you astray. Now look at the dope that's masquerading in his fancy little dress and his Dagon hat for the Roman Catholic Church. Pope Francis came out and parroted the same narrative, but he is a progressive. Everything he says economically is Marxist, socialistic, and communistic. And so he has the same disease, and it's a mind virus. And so you must step free of it. I'm doing these programs to encourage you to step free. You know, another example of the very thing I've been talking about here is cancel culture. This notion that, particularly in America, that we need to completely cancel the culture because the culture is innately racist and it works against the people of color. Nonsense. Study world history. Every civilization throughout history had a caste system. And in those caste systems, slaves were at the bottom, but nobody other than the royal family and the king himself had any free will. The next, in terms of some degree of choice, were the priests that help enforce his draconian control over people. And then the generals in the military. But everybody else in the military had no freedom. Everybody else was part of the religion, had no freedom. And everybody below those two higher castes had absolutely no freedom. There was no room for upward mobility. This caste system existed in Greece and in Rome and in Carthage. It existed in Babylon, in Assyria. It existed in Egypt. It existed in the Americas with the Aztecs, the Indians, the Incas, and the Mayans. In fact, the caste system became part of the Roman Catholic Church when it evolved from Imperial Rome. For almost all of human history, there has been no upward mobility. Then this idea of constitutional America came into being, where Thomas Jefferson knew that we needed to disassociate from religious control. And as a result, for the first time ever, there was upward mobility. In America today, there is more upward mobility for individuals of any ethnicity, of any social situation, than there has ever been in any country in the history of the world. Now, I'm not a patriotic American. I can tell you 1,000 reasons that America is wrong on many things. But the fact of the matter is, it is the opposite of what those who promote cancel culture would tell you. It is the most upwardly mobile society in the history of mankind. And yet they would form a conspiracy that would blame lack of success, not on initiative, not on education, but on this false notion that there is no upward mobility in a society that is more upwardly mobile than any in human history. This is the nature of conspiracy. As I was writing my initial draft of this chapter, a 19-year-old white supremacist and Christian, his name was John Ernst. He was a member of the Escondido Presbyterian Church outside of San Diego. He murdered an unarmed elderly Jewish woman. He attempted to kill her rabbi and then annihilate his entire congregation at the Chabad Synagogue in Poway, California. At the conclusion of Passover is when he committed his heinous crime. And while this worthless individual is just one among billions of anti-Semites, since his open letter comprises so many of the lies that have been used to falsely slander Jews, I covered much of what he had to say in the book itself. You'll have to read it because I'm not going to cover all of it, but I want to draw your attention to it, that it's there for you to understand his parting manifesto, so that we become more cognizant of the sickness pervading our world. And we're going to do so at the conclusion of the Mizmor. That's where it's written in this book, and I encourage you to read it. Again, free on the YadaYah.com site. While conspiracy theorists are sufficiently anti-Semitic to endorse even the most obvious hoaxes, such as the protocols for the elders of Zion, they now use social media to promote an ever-growing and ever more ridiculous array of social control fantasies. These include the absurd and discredited notion that the government wanted a justification to expand the military-industrial complex so that the elite in the West perpetrated 9/11, and that they blamed Muslims for what they had done. It's nonsense. The conspiratorialists would have us believe that the government wants to control the population, so the cabal had their evil scientists engineer GMO foods and vaccines, and they fluorinated the water, and those chemtrails as airplanes pass through the upper atmosphere are there to poison everyone. Well, of course, including themselves, I suppose. They allege that the empowered, in their zeal to confiscate guns from the citizenry, deployed political actors to stage all the mass shootings and bombings at schools, nightclubs, and marathon races and concerts. Then they say, because the empowered are different from the rest of us, the elitists like Hillary Clinton turned the basement of a Washington area pizzeria into a child slavery and sex ring. Now, bots, if you're listening to what I'm saying here, I'm laughing at this. I'm mocking them. None of this is true. I am criticizing the conspiratorialists. I'm telling you that they are a waste of breath, and that all of these themes, all of the things they try to demonstrate, are nothing but farces. There are even hundreds of millions who believe that the world's leading politicians are alien reptilian overlords. They are a surprising number who are convinced that the earth is flat and just 6,000 years old. Many believe that the moon landings were faked and yet believe in UFOs. Others believe that there is a mirror Earth or planet X on the other side of the sun. There are those who deny the very existence of Israelites, suggesting that the race is long extinct. Those same individuals, when they weave a web of lies to infer that there's a new Israel and a contemporaneous reenactment of the conspiracy of replacement foolology. There is even a Hebrew roots movement and black Hebrew Israelites, where those of sub-Saharan descent claim that they are the real Yehudim. Nonsense! Sadly, they have stolen my transliteration of Yahweh's name, even stolen much of my translations to take things out of context to validate their existence. Black Hebrew Israelites are nothing but racists. The Hebrew roots movement is total and complete nonsense. They are not Hebrew roots. They're simply anti-Semites, racists, blacks who are pretending to be who they are not. In all of these cases, it's to hell with Yahweh's testimony, to hell with DNA. They prefer to be beguiled and anti-Semitic. Yahweh wouldn't waste a moment on these wasted lives if it were not for three issues, all of which involve his people. First, the most prevalent and destructive conspiracy in the history of mankind has been and remains blame the Jews. Paul originated and popularized the religious rendition of this game, and Rome played it diabolically and destructively. The Roman Catholic Church has perpetrated the longest running, most pervasive, and pathetic version, going so far as to say the Jews, not Romans, killed their God on a stick. Of course, Islamic jihadists have committed the deadliest and most insane interpretation of blame the Jews. The Third Reich even managed to accuse Jews of the deplorable conditions imposed on the nation after Germans lost the First World War. Living pathetic lives, wanting someone else to blame. The world is wont to blame the Jews. Progressives are playing this game today. Well, the Nazis, of course, promoted the most sadistic application of this twisted scenario, all the way to the final solution. Although I will tell you that blame the Jews was played out in Russia, in Ukraine, and in Poland, and in Greece with their pogroms long before the rise of the Nazis. Christianity foisted the menace in Europe, England, and in the Americas. and Islam carried the torch throughout Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. It is promoted in academia today in lockstep with the myth that there is such thing as a place called Palestine and a Palestinian people who are somehow deserving of their homeland. When the last Philistine was killed over 2,300 years ago by the Greeks, before them, the Egyptians, before them, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and then before them, King David gave these terrorists a run for their money. And now it is rampant on the internet, flourishing worldwide, this myth that the solution is to give the Fakistinians a state, when all it would be doing is rewarding terrorism. All it would be doing is carving the heart out of Israel and making the country indefensible. All it would be doing is playing Neville Chamberlain all over again when he gave the high ground of Czechoslovakia, which wasn't his to give as the Prime Minister of Great Britain, to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, in a religion that is indistinguishable in so many ways from Islam. And if the Muslims are given a state of terror carved out of Israel, war will ensue just as it did when Neville Chamberlain gave the Nazis the high ground of Czechoslovakia. Based on all we have learned, based upon the harm it has caused, based upon the nature of the perpetrators, there is nothing on the planet that God despises more than anti-Semitic conspiracies. And don't just limit them to the protocols of the elders of Zion. Christianity and Islam and Judaism are all anti-Semitic conspiracies. Christianity exists to replace Dowd, Jews, and Israel with Jesus, their church, and Christians. Islam does the same thing, with Allah having no credibility apart from the Talmud readings that rabbis sold him, claiming to be the God of the Torah and prophets, wanting to claim the world for that horrible lie. But you might say, how is it possible that Judaism could be anti-Semitic? What do you think the word Shem means? It means name. The religion that erased Yahweh's name, that was anti-Shem, is the religion that calls their God by the name of Hashem, because they won't say his name. Judaism is the most anti-Semitic religion in the world. All of them lie in the crosshairs of Yahweh's most basic warning. I will discredit those who harass you. And in the third statement that Yah etched in stone, those who devalue my name, I will never forgive. Second, conspiracies comprise the worst form of Babel. Their proponents not only ignore the obvious and provable explanations, rejecting that which is valid and verifiable, they commingle all manner of deceptions, suggesting that truth is found in a concoction of lies. They slander everyone who proves that they are ridiculous while reinforcing their mythology by snickering among themselves. They are universally less receptive to evidence and reason than the most religious or political devotees. By clinging to such ridiculous babble, the conspiratorialists are prohibited from participating in the covenant. There is no option for heaven. And by misleading hundreds of thousands, billions and billions, they set themselves up to be judged and to be condemned, to be sentenced to Sheol. Anything capable of debilitating billions of souls, squandering their opportunity to understand, and harassing God's people is worthy of God's righteous indignation. Third, promoting inane interpretations of reality that is otherwise readily explainable events under the title truthers has a tendency to repel thoughtful individuals while ensnaring fellow morons. And while idiots are easy to manipulate, the narcissists who stir the conspiracy plot desperately seek the kind of validation that continuance full of numbskulls can't provide. So to give them the credibility needed to attract and hold ever more devotees, they need to mix their lives with enough truth to make these self-proclaimed saviors appear believable. And since nothing has ever been as credible as Yahweh's words, they are used as a veneer to glue the chaff of conspiracy together, such that it will fool enough fools for the foolish to have a following. This is the secret to the success of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Scientology, as well as progressives. It is also found interwoven amongst all conspiracies promoted today. There isn't a remote or isolated problem here. Conspiracy sites have latched on to my translations, my transliterations and insights, and have claimed them as their own, as if they wrote them. Then after using them to draw in those actually searching for the meaning of life, they take them on the unsuspecting journey in the darkest and most twisted holes of their imaginations. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have been led to question these translations of Yahweh's words, even reject them, not on their merits, instead based upon their incorporation into social media sites promoting the most absurd conspiracies. Don't be fooled. Worse, the gaggle of goons on these sites call themselves covenant. Well, they use Yahweh's name and they weave insights that are known only through these books, through their texts and threads. And they are rude, abusive, arrogant, delusional, and obnoxious, always picking fights. If there were hundreds of sites and audio programs devoted to accurately translating Yahweh's testimony and freely sharing the insights derived from them, this problem wouldn't be so significant. But because they are few, and because they are entirely related to the work that I have done on the books that I have written, the translations I have comprised, the insights I have deduced, these conspiratorialists have engaged the one calling his people home. He is so angry that he even predicted their contrarian influence by derogatorily referring to them in this song. So I'm going to share the opening line, and then we'll pick this up with our next program so we don't run too long. I don't want to overstate my welcome with you. Dode begins, Walutz, Derek, Hugh, Bazah, Hugh. And so, the devious nut who misleads and perverts in his despicable manner and ways disrespects and belittles him as a God, plundering the people by showing contempt while despising him. This is Mashal Word Pictures, Proverb 14:2. It's followed by Ba, He, Iu, Choder, Gawa. In the mouth of the foolish simpletons, devoid of understanding, the quarrelsome, stubborn, stupid, and shameless, there is a haughty and glorified, insignificant twig, a sucker, which will arise. Mashal Word Pictures, Proverb 14:3. These trolls permeate social media and the internet, infecting tens of millions with their videos and their tweets and their texts and their posts. These things don't. This is Dode's warning. For what reason Lama, why? Toward what end? And for what purpose, one should ask, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming and rebellious Gentiles gather together to conspire in open defiance? Ragash Goyim, do vociferous and disorderly crowds of restless religious, political, and militant ethnicities and countries engaged and estranged from Yisrael rise up to vehemently and hostilely agitate and fellowship with one another? Why do they do so? Why do they promote these clandestine conspiracies? The people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, Leom, these groups who associate and gather together under an individual who changes them in some way as a result of his primitive and arcane concepts, choose to plot and speak Haggah, are driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided and selective searching, muttering their musing aloud, while their imagined grievances and ultra-personal beliefs are all formed after giving considerable attention to selective information, to scheme to remove the people who are the focus of their complaint. All doing so in vain, deluded in their fantasies, acting out with no reason. This is Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2:1. It is prophetic of our day, when conspiracies, especially those which inappropriately impugn Jews, are so prolific that they're woven into the fabric of the human psyche. When the opposite of what they say is true, and their lies become widely accepted, we find God asking his creation why they are promoting such stupid notions. What is the end game? What is the purpose? What is to be gained by these noisy and confused throngs of unrestrained and scheming, rebellious Gentiles? Define Yahweh's teaching, his son's oratory, and his people's inheritance. It's a good place for us to close this program. We'll be back with you with at least one more, maybe 2 or 3 more episodes from the Voice, Volume 1 of Coming Home in future programs. And we thank you for listening. We encourage you to go to yadayah.com, where you'll find Coming Home towards the right side of that bookshelf. May Yah bless. This has been the Yahowah blog, and I am your host, Craig Wynn.